Drone UAPs are everywhere, made by places like America, Britain, Russia, China, Israel, Germany, Iran, and so on. But there are others, those few lucky enough to have a security clearance above social media verification, knows that there are ones that seemingly no one can properly identify, and that includes the origins, operational functions, and purpose. Everything can be covered with a blanket of newer classified technology, which is very often the case legitimately. But when you lift that blanket hidden underneath, well, often you'll find many pieces of historical context that seem to blow out of the sky today's UAPs or just our drones theory. And what happened all those years ago in Ohio is something that even today should be enough to triangulate everybody's attention to start looking at old history with new eyes. Triangle UAPs, first reported by investigative journalist and filmmaker Jeremy Corbell, are just drones or bokeh or lens flare oceanic swamp gas from weather balloons. Then what was it that dozens, likely hundreds or more people around the Cincinnati area over 70 years ago were seeing? Including a group of priests, journalists, a newspaper publisher, police, and the government. Even video and pictures were taken, but then someone allegedly took them. Just not people's memories, or all the photographic evidence. During the hot Ohio summer of August 1949, Father Gregory Miller, pastor of the old Saints in Peter and Paul Church, was running the parish fundraiser, enjoying an assortment of live performances, games, attractions. It really was no small affair. To draw a crowd that opening night, a large surplus military searchlight left over from the Second World War was brought over to the church, operated by Sergeant Donald Berger, over from the Reserve Officer Training Corps at the University of Cincinnati. And it was around 8:30, the giant beam of light swirling through the sky, well, it suddenly bounced off and hit an object, and it wasn't moving. Described as a large circular metallic object, similar sightings occurred that night throughout the area, including by a Weather Bureau official who saw the phenomenon, which helped spur the Cincinnati Post to seemingly mention it the next day, but with little fanfare. According to the weather official, this is what he described. Looked like two weather-sealing balloons, but they weren't moving. There was a wind of 25 to 32 miles an hour, so if they'd been balloons, they would have moved. It's an interesting observation and worth noting. The fact that they were seen not moving in the wind speaks directly to the observations of someone like Lieutenant Ryan Graves, a drone AI and quantum mechanics expert when it comes to its future military applications. He says the UAPs that he saw and other pilots, well, they were encountering ones that could remain stationary at extremely high altitudes, high winds, without any movement, means of propulsion, avionics, for hours and hours or more. Something we seemingly can't duplicate today. This is a photograph of Sergeant Berger and his searchlight that he also operated at two other churches in the area in the following weeks. Both of those incidents also reportedly drew a similar-shaped circular metallic craft to the sky. By late October, Sergeant Berger had brought the searchlight back to the church. The goal was to try to draw out the UFO again, and just as it had been appearing for weeks before throughout the area, it seemed to like the searchlight. According to the book Inside Saucer Post 30 Blue by longtime noted UFO investigator Leonard Stringfield, he cites Berger's log from that night and what everyone saw. Berger claimed when the light was activated back on October 23rd on the church grounds, there were about 50 people in attendance. Everyone had gathered with the hopes of attracting that UFO and hoping to figure out what had been going on. It had been the talk of the summer. A local police sergeant was also in attendance, and he brought a camera and filmed everything that happened that evening. One of the witnesses was also a local businessman named William Winkler. He set up his telescope. He'd seen the object too that summer and wanted to help solve the mystery. According to Stringfield's book, Winkler, like many others that day, says he saw two groups of smaller objects seemingly exit the large round UAP-type craft, except he described them as triangular in shape, not round like the larger craft they seemingly came from. Father Gregory Miller says there were two groups of 5 triangular-shaped objects seen leaving the larger circular UAP. According to the ufologist Stringfield, the managing editor of the Post, Robert Lynn, was in attendance that night, and he told him later on in an interview that he did see something bounce off the searchlight, some definite object, but said the smaller triangular-shaped objects he saw, well, to him they looked more like bits of paper. The reporter he brought along with him said it was probably just sunlight hitting birds. But there was another witness present that day, and he firmly disagreed with the paper that it was just bits of paper. Miller's younger brother, Reverend Cletus Miller, bore witness to the same events as the other men, and he agreed with his older brother's assessment. He didn't think they were birds or bits of paper. He described them as looking like arrowheads. And Father Cletus wasn't just doing this out of brotherly love and loyalty to his sibling. He was using his professional training to fuel his observations. You see, Father Cletus was the dean of a research institute created by the Archdiocese of Cincinnati. The institute's goal was to show how religion and science weren't in conflict and could coexist and grow in harmony together. It was operated under the direction of Dr. George Spurdy, the former director of the Basic Science Laboratory at the University of Cincinnati. Together, the men helped oversee the creation of things like Aspercream and Preparation H. And this is where things really start to get interesting. While the men all disagreed on what those smaller objects were that they had seen that October night, they all agreed to report it to nearby Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which for Roswell enthusiasts, well, this particular location has a long-standing lore in the UFO community as one of the epicenters of the alleged UAP cover-up. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is one of the locations where pieces from the Roswell crash back in 1947 were allegedly taken, including reports by some pilots of transporting alien bodies, possibly even a live one. Ufology has long rumbled about the place, including an infamous spot called Hangar 18 that has gone on for decades, but there is no record of a Hangar 18 or any others by that name. There is a Building 18, and that's no secret. And if there was an installation like that, it's almost assuredly a lot harder to find, and it is most definitely buried deep underground. As far as the local UFO sightings were concerned, well, the base was already onto things. Government operatives working on Project Grudge, the predecessor to the infamous Project Blue Book looking into UFOs that tried to debunk the phenomenon for years, well, they were using Wright-Patterson Air Force Base as their headquarters, and they already knew all about the so-called Norwood sightings. Members of the Office for the Special Investigations were with Father Miller later that year on December 20th, along with 2 scientists from the University of Cincinnati, a physicist and an astronomer, and they all allegedly witnessed a UFO that night. The 2 scientists reported to the Cincinnati Post it was either an optical illusion or just the illumination of gas in the atmosphere. But the scientists weren't the only ones in attendance that night. The mayor of Norwood was there that evening in December, and he apparently told the author Stringfield that the object they all witnessed that was filmed by one of the scientists who brought along other equipment, well, he seemingly told the government agents on site that the object they were looking at, he estimated it to be a massive 10,000 feet in diameter. Sightings in the area continued until that spring, and then the issue seemed to drop off the radar. But the city of Cincinnati didn't forget. A few years later, in 1952, Father Miller apparently engaged in a heated debate on local TV station WCPO with a reporter from the Cincinnati Post who was there that night in October and thought the triangle-shaped UAPs were just birds. They even showed the audience the police sergeant's footage from that night, which seemed to be the first and only time the footage was ever seen in public. And the episode, it was never rebroadcast, and the footage has never reappeared. But there still exists a couple of photographs, Likely, there are others. This is a photograph that allegedly shows Sergeant Berger's light hitting some kind of object in the sky. So, what were the Norwood sightings? What is it that everyone was seeing from 1949 to 1950? Well, that still remains a mystery. But my hunch is these aren't the only occasions where triangle-shaped UAPs have popped up, which makes claims these things aren't ours? Anything but a pyramid scheme. Thanks for watching, and a big thanks to Greg Hand out of Cincinnati on this. I'm Sean. If you enjoy the content, be sure to subscribe and like. Stay tuned, another great video is coming up next.